Hello, this is the fourth and final lecture for the first week. And in this lecture, what I want to do is go through a really simple problem and walk through how you might go from a word problem to an actual piece of Matlab code. All right, so here's the problem statement. You've been given $1 and you get to spend it at the candy store. And you get to decide how much of each kind of candy that you want. And you also have to make sure, though, that it comes in at under $1. So there's some guidelines about what the candy costs listed here. And the types of questions you might ask is, if I have 6 rock candies and 5 gums, how much have I spent? Another type of question might be like, have I spent over $1? And if so, what do I have to put back? Or if I haven't quite spent $1 yet, how much more do I have left to spend? It's a fairly simple problem. So in order to go from this fairly simple problem into a MATLAB script, you have to do a couple different things. The first is to write down what you think the inputs are, the equations, and the outputs. So this is breaking that word problem into pieces that you can turn into MATLAB code. So the first question is, what are my inputs? What do I actually know? What numbers can I write down? So obviously, you can write down the cost of each candy type. You can also write down how much of each that you want. So those are our variables. Now, our equations are, what do you do with those inputs? What do I calculate with those numbers? And in this case, it's fairly simple. You take the cost of each candy, you multiply it by the number of candies that you want to buy. That gives you the amount for that candy, and then you add up the amounts for each of the candies. Okay, so output. What do I want to know? Well, the answer is, what you want to know is that amount. That's at least a starting place. From there, you might have a whole bunch of other questions that you might want to make, or decisions you want to make, such as if the amount's bigger than $1, how much do I have to give back? What do I have to get rid of? If the amount's smaller, then how much more can I add, and so on. So we're not really going to go over those today. We're going to go over those in kind of week 3 and 4. Mostly what I want to do right now is go over those first 3 things: input, equations, and outputs. But kind of think about how you might do that decision making. And the other thing to point out is that you you'd make some changes. We'd add some of this candy, delete some of this one, and then you'd recalculate the amount, and you might be closer to $1 or not closer. How would you keep doing this until you get closer to being $1? Like I said, we'll talk all about this stuff in week 3. Okay, so let's turn what we have so far, the input, the equations, and the output, into some code. So each of our inputs becomes a variable. Then we write the equations with the variables, and then our output is also a variable which we print out in some way. So this is the MATLAB code. I am going to jump into actual MATLAB here, so you can see this in MATLAB. There we go. So here's the script that I've created. This clear CLC is just some stuff to make sure that we clear the variables and the window before we start. So here we have one variable for each cost of each candy. And you notice here that I put comments with the units because MATLAB doesn't know anything about units. So these could be $35, they could be 35 seashells, it could be anything. So we put down cents so that the people who read this script know that this is how much it costs. So we write down our inputs, and then we also write down the amount of each one that I want, for each of these. Now here's that equation. So remember that we want to take each cost times each candy and then add it up. So here you see 1, 2, 3, 4 additions. See these little blue dots? If you're curious about what those are, it just lets me wrap the line so that it all fits nice and neatly inside of one screen. So here's our inputs, here's our equation, and this is our output. So this is the thing that we wanted to calculate. And in order to print it out nicely, we have this thing called an fprintf statement, which you'll read about in CY books. It looks like a string, these things between purple marks. This is telling you what it is I'm printing out. This says I'm going to put a number here, and then here's this variable. Now the reason you do this way instead of actually just writing a number in here is so that if we change any of these, everything else updates properly. So we can change rock candy to cost 40 cents, rerun the script, and we'll get out the correct answer. That's part of the reason we use variables. So right now I'm going to do run just to see what happens. You'll always get this when you start to run. You always want to choose change folder. All right, we run, we go over to the command, and it says, look, the total cost of the candy is $2.01, so I'm way, way over my budget. So the next thing I might do is go back here and say, okay, I'm way over my budget. Which ones should I get rid of? Which ones are most expensive? All right, we'll take the lollipop. All right, let's change the lollipop amount. I'm going to do 3 lollipops. And then I'll run this. So I run it again, and I'm going to get the answer this time with this amount. And we're lower, but we still aren't all the way to $1. So maybe this time I say, okay, all right, I'll get rid of the rock candy. And I'll run. Oh, now we're close to $1. We're 1 cent off for $1. So you can see that you can kind of keep redoing these calculations. All you have to do is hit run every time, change your number, hit run. So that's kind of one of the advantages of writing all of this with equations. Now, next week we'll talk a little bit more about how to do try a bunch of different combinations, how to make this equation look a little less clunky, like what happens if you want more candy or less candy, candy types, and so on. So we'll talk more about that next week. Right now I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint slides. All right, so what did we do? We took our simple problem, we turned it into variables, turned it into an equation, and the value of that equation we output. So now what? Well, like I said, you can change the numbers and rerun until you get closer to $1. How do you decide how to change those numbers? That's an algorithm. So that's the hard part of this class, is figuring out how to write down the logic about what to do. The logic is actually pretty simple. If you've ever played the game of pick a number between 1 and 10, then this should be familiar. So you say, I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 10. Somebody says 3, and you say, no, it's higher than that. Then you know you need to go between 3 and 10. So you try something like 7, and then I say, no, it's lower than that. And you can keep ballparking this till you get a number. So the type of algorithm we would use for this is very similar to that. But the challenge in this class is going from that concept all the way to actual Matlab code. All right, so next week, like I said, we'll try a bunch of combinations all at once, and we'll try writing it with an array. This script, by the way, is in Canvas. You can download it and play with it all you want. That's it for today.